Historically, first off, this originally was not an Elks Lodge. This place used to belong to a different fraternal organization known as the Odd Fellows. And their office was above Watson's Drugs. But they acquired a $100,000 loan for the building of this magnificent structure. And they finished it just in time for the Great Depression.
No.
They could not pay on it, and so they sold it to the Elks and they moved back to Watson's. The Elks have actually owned this building outright since the 1940s. And it has not changed a bit. This is it in the 1960s. Okay? Now, the Elks Lodge itself is known to be haunted. Okay? One of my favorite stories about the Elks Lodge itself is over the years I've become kind of like good passing friends with one of the doormen. And he talked to us about how they hired a gentleman to do cleanup after banquets. And he knew that he was going to be the only one in the building. He's the last one to leave. And so he was doing dishes and he had earbuds in listening to music. And he said several times while he was cleaning up after a banquet, a gentleman would walk into the kitchen and try to have a conversation with him. But he's wearing earbuds, so he like waves the guy off. He was walking down the hallway with the doorman one day, and down this hallway was all the pictures of their former leaders. And the dishwasher stopped and he goes, "That's the guy who talks to me. The gentleman has been dead for over 20 years. Now, even though the Elks Lodge is known for its ghosts, I am actually more interested in this part right here. For people, who here has been here from the town of Orange? You might remember this as Orange Sporting Goods. And it was actually the gentleman who owned Orange Sporting Goods was the first one to talk about it being haunted. He talked about how he saw objects move in the store. A gentleman delivering a box of uniforms in a cardboard box walked down the internal stairs to take them down to the basement, and he fell down the stairs. And the only thing that saved him from harm is he landed on the box of uniforms. And when the owner ran to him to make sure he was okay, the gentleman was extremely distressed and in shock. He said, "I did not fall down the stairs, somebody pushed me." He talked about how people who claim to be psychic or empathic would walk into the store. They make it about 20 feet and they're like, "Not today." Now, it's interesting, when we had a chance to interview him when he left, we're like, "So what's the thing that made you want to sell?" Hello. And he was like, "Well, one day I was closing up shop and I'm the only one there. I hear a voice murmuring." And so he followed the voice murmuring until he came right over here where the cash register was. And then he heard the voice say, "Look over here." And he looked at the window and the window cracked. And he's like, "Now's a good time to sell the store." So he sold it to Dennis and it became Chapman Antiques. Now, have we all been in an antique mall before? Yeah. You understand how they rent out the little spaces? In one section of the store, once Dennis moved in, all the price tags started missing from one of the little cubicle areas. He thought it was somebody playing a practical joke. So he set up cameras that could find nothing. So one little section of the store, all the little price tags were missing. And that went on for several weeks, and then it stopped. There was a very large display case in the rear end of the store. It was so tall that if you wanted to put something on top, you had to get a ladder. And it was so wide, it took several people to move it away from the wall. And when it was time for them to do some cleaning, when they pulled it away from the wall, they found every single one of the price tags neatly stacked going up the wall. Now,
We should get him. Yes.
not on me. Now, the one thing I love about this place, though, is when Dennis was getting ready to retire, he told us a story about a phenomenon that happened to where he set the alarm and he left for the day and everything is fine. Now, you guys seen those Victorian lamps, right, with the big glass ball shade? There was a woman who sold these downstairs where most of the activity takes place. And so when he set the alarm and he went home and everything was fine, when he opened the door and turned off when he came in here, turned off the alarm and he went downstairs, someone or something has removed all of the lampshades and they were making a single row going down one of the aisles. Now, he retired a few years ago. Every once in a while, these little pop-up stores come in, like these guys who sold vintage bicycles. Nobody lasts long, because whatever is here is not very nice. A lot of people experience things like hair pulling, or they'll be looking at an aisle when it was a store and they'll feel somebody brushing up against them and they turn around and no one is there. These guys just moved in. I wish them the best of luck.
Let's see how long they last.
See how long they last.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Go gap right here. Come on in. There you go. Come on in. All right. Where are my people from Orange? Okay, so who here's never been to downtown Orange? Okay, down. Okay. Now, I want to welcome you to the town of Richland. That's the original name for this town. This town is actually founded in 1874 by two guys you never heard of before, Chapman and Gosell. They're lawyers. They are actually given this land to pay for legal services. You were on the Rancho Santiago de Santa Ana, one of the largest land grants in Southern California. It is actually Gosell's brother who will lay out all the streets, including the plaza. So, this town of Richland gets bigger, and it gets so big that they need a post office. And so, they will apply for the town of Richland, and they are denied because there already was a Richland, California. So they went with their second choice, Orange. I want to welcome you to the town of Orange in 1888, the official year that this town was founded. That's the plaza. Okay, did anybody here park at the library?
Yes.
You know where they keep books? What's a book? Okay. You guys know the fountain there? There's a fountain in the picture from 1888. Now, I find the history of this place fascinating, but that is not why you're here. There's actually a very famous ghost story associated with the plaza itself. Two young boys always played in the plaza in the early years of Orange. And one of them ran out into the street, and his best friend instinctively ran after him, and both of them were killed by passing traffic. For many years, people talked about seeing two young boys playing in the street. And when they told them to get out of the street, they are gone. It's interesting how over the years we found that story many years in the newspapers over and over again until the 1980s. Why? The town of Orange changed. Chapman University. Restaurants started staying open late. Nightclubs, bars, what have you. So you missed the subtlety of the activity. Until, of course, 1996. They were filming a movie here. That Thing You Do with Tom Hanks. It was filmed here in the town of Orange. And a production designer in the pre-dawn hours was making her way down the street to set up for the morning shot. And as soon as she came into the plaza, she saw two young boys playing in the street. She was actually more upset that two kids made their way onto a closed set. So she ran to the security booth, which was only a few yards away, and when they came back, they were gone. She reported them as wearing white blousey shirts, dark trousers, and suspenders. Be careful driving home tonight. There's still two kids trying to make They're waiting.
Lovely.
Now, who here watches American Horror Story? You sick little monkeys.
Nope.
You
I'm
might
not getting into it.
recognize the Chase branch over there is the Butchery Restaurant from season 7. They actually film a lot of the show in Orange and Santa Ana.
No way.
Let's make our way. Come on in. We got plenty of room over here as well. Come on in, please. So, we are right outside the alcove of this store right here. This is Pixley's Furniture Store. The Pixley name is huge in this town. A couple streets over there's a Pixley Avenue and a Pixley Mansion. This is Pixley's Furniture Store. Now, don't think about it, but what's the first thing you see when you see the picture? The horse. There you go. The horse? What do you see?
Oh no, I see some lady.
You're thinking now. What do you see?
No, I
The
mean, it
horse?
looks like it's
What do you
just
see?
a head.
No, just kidding. Now, see, a lot of people go with the horse, they might go with the people, they might even go with the rocking chair, but the thing is a lot of people miss is they miss the sign that says Orange Undertaker Parlor. This is a furniture store and it's a morgue.
Oh.
Who's making the caskets?
Okay.
And you did not have to be a medical professional to be an undertaker. You just basically had to go, yeah, he's dead. And so, the horse did not deliver a chest of drawers. A body has just arrived. And they're going to take a body through a furniture store where it'll go into an elevator in the back, down into the basement where the body is processed. A casket is made, and then the casket will go through the busy furniture store again to be loaded back up onto a wagon and taken to Fairhaven. Who thinks that's weird? A little bit. But the only thing is, it's exactly what it was. If you are good enough to have your grandparents still alive today, ask them how their parents died at home. We just spent the last 100 years pushing death away from us. So the idea of actually seeing a dead body would not have been too uncommon at this time period. As well as, you see these large bay windows? Wouldn't be used just for the displaying of furniture. Let's say you found a body in the street you could not identify. You would pack them in ice and stick them in the window. Kind of like a Victorian milk carton. Have you seen me? As well as, they might put you up there if you broke the law and you were gunned down by the local constable. As in, this is what happens when you break the law in my town. Which is kind of awesome. This was actually a mortuary all the way up until the 1940s. And that is when the accident happened. A young woman came here to say goodbye to a recently deceased relative, and she went into the back to the elevator, got in the elevator, and the elevator failed. And it plummeted down into the sub-basement in which she was killed in the accident. And for many years after that, people saw a woman in 1940s clothing in both this store and the apartments upstairs. It's so much part of the history of the building that we've spoken to people who live upstairs, and they're told by the landlord, here's your key, here's the lease, by the way, there's a ghost. It's very interesting that the gentleman who owns Mataska had no idea of the story itself until we showed him the one section of the wall where the brickwork is different than the others, where the old elevator once stood. Now, before we leave the old mortuary, I want to show you Pixley's better customers. These are all funerals from the town of Omaha. Does anybody know what kind of flower you bring to a funeral? Lilies. Covers the smell of the body. Now, by the way, for those of you not from Orange, mufflers are apparently an endangered species. Now, before we leave, let's talk about this. How do you guys feel about being buried alive? Now, how many people do you actually think were buried alive? Well, I guess we'll never know, right? But they did disinter coffins where the lining of the coffin has been scratched out. Because if you were in a town in which infection was running rampant and somebody was to fall and go into almost a coma-like sleep because of the medicine being what it was, you might hastily inter somebody only to have them wake up in their own grave. Now the thing is, this was rare, but people like Edgar Allan Poe were not helping the situation. And so, they actually invented something new. Instead of putting the body in the ground right away, you purposely put it in bed and you waited 24 hours. They now call that a wake. And there was special ways to keep yourself from being buried alive, including a bell that was attached to the top of your tombstone and strings that ran down to your grave and in your hand. And if by chance you were to wake up, you could simply ring the bell and hopefully somebody is sober enough to get you.
Lovely.
It's called Bateson's Belfry. How many of these do you think he sold? A lot. How many people were saved? None.
Oh.
Okay, but Bateson himself, by today's standards, would be called obsessive compulsive. And one day he decided to end it all. He committed suicide by self-immolation. He set himself on fire,
Oh my gosh.
completely eliminating the possibility of being buried alive. Who's hungry?